Well, hello again, my friends, and welcome once more to the Invisible College. And today's going to be a bit different. Instead of doing a big PowerPoint presentation, I've been doing a lot of those lately, we're going to have a more informal chat using the old flashcards and talking to camera. I quite enjoy doing this from time to time, and I allow the thoughts to come more easily than if I'm reading what I've actually prepared in advance. And today I want to talk about the whole subject of reincarnation, which I know is something that interests a lot of people, and it's a bewildering subject for us, particularly in the West, because we're taught both by the religion of the West, which is Christianity fundamentally, and also by the irreligion, the atheism of the West, that there's no such thing as reincarnation. You know, the Western Christian tradition, at least as it's come down to us, is that it's a one-shot deal here. You know, you come into life as a screaming, puking baby, and you've got one shot at it. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be, Prince George, who's the son of Prince William, who's going to be, future king. And you can be looking forward to this lovely life in the future where you're going to be king, you're going to have the palaces, you're going to be waving at the crowds, you're going to be riding the golden coach. You're going to be fated and very rich. Or you're born into a council flat in a single parent family. It's going to be a hard life. It's a difficult situation. You know, there's gangs all around you, bullying at school. You could be born into that life. But it doesn't matter because, it's a one-shot deal. You make a mistake in that life, you're going to hell. Of course, he's in his golden carriage. It's unlikely to go to hell because he's got it made, hasn't he? We've got the whole thing twisted, I think, because we don't understand that it's not a one-shot deal, that people live many lives on this planet. Most of us have probably been here thousands of times. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but certainly many, many times. And it's more like a situation where all the world is a stage and you come in as an actor and you're going to act a role. And this role, this play that you're in, this time maybe it's Hamlet. I don't know if you ever sat through Hamlet. It's a very boring play, I think. Too long. If I were the editor of Shakespeare, I'd have said, well, cut out a couple of hours here. It's too long, Shakespeare. Make it shorter. Get back to the action quicker. That's what I would have said. But anyway, it ends up with virtually everyone dying miserably, including Hamlet himself. That's one kind of play. Or it might have been The Merry Wives of Windsor. A nice jolly comedy, fun and games. And you could be in that. The two roles would be completely different, yeah. Or you could be in one of the king plays. Yeah, you might be in Henry V. Once more onto the breach, dear friends. All that, great bold fighting scenes, knights in armour, fantastic. Or it could be, Macbeth, say, nasty murder plot. You can find yourself in all these different scenarios. And the thing is that if you are reincarnating, what reincarnates? How is it that you might be in all these different plays? And that's what we're going to consider today. So let me go through these cards one at a time, and we'll have a little chat around this subject and see where it takes us. So first of all, what reincarnates? And I put here, your body is recycling all the time. Yeah, well, your body is reincarnating all the time. There's cells dying, there's new cells being born. Some of the material that makes up those new cells is recycled material from dead cells. Some of the stuff goes to your spleen and it gets, dealt with and recycled back for new cells. Other material is digested from the food that you eat. And you take in energy through breathing air as well. We've gone into some of that with earlier lectures. So your body is reincarnating all the time. And so at any given moment, this body of mine is just a snapshot The body itself is changing every second. It's changing. There is something which you can say, well, that's Adrian. I recognise him, yeah, walking down the street. Yes, but it was a different Adrian physically from the Adrian yesterday. And they say that within 7 years, everything in your body is completely recycled, bones and all. So what is it? Is the continuity of this body? Well, it is actually a mirage in a way. It's more like an appearance and that appearance changes as well, of course, doesn't it? Because you go through the stages of life. Yeah, the little boy Adrian is completely different from the old man Adrian, and then there's all the in between stages, and Shakespeare's thing, all the world's a stage, and the 7 roles of man, the schoolboy going off to school reluctantly, the lover and the soldier and the merchant, all of these different stages in life you go through. Which one is actually you? Which one is you? You might wish it was me when I still had long hair and all the girls fancied me. Yeah, I'd like to still be that guy. But you're not, are you? As you get older, things change. You have to go with the wave. You have to move through life and experience each period of your life differently. And if you're still living in the past, you're going to be very unhappy. If you can live in the present and enjoy the situation that you find yourself in now and the opportunities it presents you, because every period of your life presents opportunities, also difficulties, but those difficulties themselves can be opportunities for growth. So this is again ties back with the idea of the child born in a council house, and the single parent family is difficult for him compared with the prince and his golden carriage. That difficulty allows that person to grow in certain ways and in certain types of their being. You can grow your determination and your will to overcome those problems, and you can become a better person through that. On the other hand, you might have a life which is a relaxation life, where things are made easy for you, where you're given the rewards, and there's not so much struggle in that life. That happens too, I'll come back to some of the other things a bit later. Anyway, I've written down here, when you die, the atoms of your body are recycled. Well, what more do I need to say on that? Ashes to ashes. What survives death? I've written on the second card here. And I've written, you have a subtle body that leaves your corpse and carries your consciousness for a time. Well, you've heard about these people who have what are called near-death experiences. They actually die, the heart stops, and they find themselves outside of their body. Sometimes they say, well, there's a tunnel of light, and I'm drawn through this tunnel of light, and I go there, and I go to heaven, and I see God, and I talk to God, and I talk to some angels, and then I have to go back. And it's terrible. I'm going to coming back because that's such a wonderful place there. I wanted to stay, but I can't, and I'm drawn back down. And I find myself back in this body, and it's painful and it hurts. And when they wake up, they are able to tell the people, I went to heaven. And sometimes, not always, sometimes they will have been in that room watching the doctors trying to save their life and the nurses, and they're listening to the conversation that these people are having. Well, we better do this, that, or the other, and let's just try this, and they'll tell those people exactly what they said, what they were wearing, who was in the room, and they're flabbergasted. How on earth could this person who was completely unconscious, even if not dead, he was completely unconscious, how could he know all of that? And they said, well, I was standing there, I was right there. So there is something that, if you are open to the idea, that leaves your body after you die. Now here's a very funny thing. I don't know what it is about people who are atheists, but they have to tell everyone. And I was watching Billy Connolly. I guess it was an old a recording of one of his shows. And he's a very funny guy, right? Top comedian, stand-up. And he was, giving his usual routine. I was laughing. He's a very funny guy. But then suddenly, for no reason at all, he suddenly said, well, there is no God. When you die, that's it. Finished. You're done. That's you done. And I thought, why has he suddenly said this? It's nothing to do with his show. And then I remember a little while back I was watching Ricky Gervais, another funny guy, and I love the way he's so politically incorrect and just says what he feels like saying, especially when he's addressing these Hollywood greats at Golden Globes or whatever it was, and he's telling them to get their little prize and get off because we don't want to hear their politics. And I thought, well, that's great. But then he suddenly goes into this thing about, well, there's no such thing as life after death. When you die, that's it. Get used to it. And again, I thought, what is this? Why is this happening? Why are people doing this? And I realized that, in a way, it's a kind of fear, and a fear that's twisted round, and that they don't want to be mocked for being so stupid as to believe what the golems, like people like us, believe, the idiot rabble who aren't successful, who aren't in the elite, who aren't accepted as very clever. Stephen Fry is another one, does the same thing. We're above that. We're scientific. We understand, it's just this life, and it evolved out of slugs, and here we are, and once we die, that's it. Well, actually it shows profound ignorance, in my opinion. It means they haven't studied any philosophy and any understanding of what great people in the past have had to say. And I watched, I went to a lecture years and years ago, back in the 70s. There's a painter, a famous painter in Britain called Cecil Collins. And I think he was a teacher at, I think it was St. Martin's School of Art, one of those. And he was giving a lecture, and he was talking about our culture. And he was saying that our culture, and he meant Western culture as it is today, atheistic culture, is the only one in history not to have a metaphysical basis, which means it's an aberration. I thought that was a very interesting observation. That every other culture you look at, they've always got their gods and understandings of what happens after death, and they might be right, they might be wrong, but they've always had a metaphysical basis. And you think of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and absolutely that way. So what lives after? Well, first of all, there's this idea of this body, something of you that comes out. But when you go into these teachings a bit more deeply, you realize that embodiment of your personality, where you still see yourself as you still, it's just Adrian come out of his body, he still looks like Adrian, still, to all intents and purposes, me. You have the same personality, everything. That only lasts for a short time, and you go through a second death. And this is actually one of the teachings of Gurdjieff. You then have a situation, and you're in dire peril. And it was well understood by the Tibetan Buddhists that you then need to get back into another body, because your body will support your consciousness and your soul. Artificially, we talked about this in earlier lectures about the fall of man and so on, that you can eat the fruits of nature and breathe the air of this planet, and this body is alive and it will support you. It makes energies that will support you. When you lose that, your subtle body's only got a certain amount of energy in itself. It's a bit like your mobile phone. It's now disconnected and it's got a certain amount of charge in it. But once that charge has run out, it's not going to work. You've got to get it plugged back in. And that's the same with us. Now, development, the true development in the Western Christian tradition, is while you're still alive in this body, you get yourself plugged in to the mains, which is the Logos, the higher Holy Ghost spirit, which is an energy source connected to God himself, which we're cut off from, normally speaking. As I say, our bodies support us indirectly through nature. But if you can manage to get connected, then when you die, you don't need to come back here, because you are connected to a very, very high, or the highest energy source. And you then join the communion of saints, as it's called. That's what they call it in the Catholic Church. And that's why they're all shown with halos, because they're illumined, they have light. They have the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit. Spirit means breath, by the way. So there's the holy breath is flowing through them. And that is what's maintaining them. They don't need to eat. They don't need to have, to come back to this earth. But the thing is, if you do come back to this earth, you go through other processes. And we'll come to that in a minute here. Right, so I've written here, you are a soul. With the second death of the subtle body, you need to go back into life. This is personal reincarnation. So that's the normal thing that happens. You're maybe Joe Bloggs in the last life, and this time you're John Smith, and in the next life you're going to be, I don't know, Wendy Cousins. Go from life to life to life, and it's like Shakespeare said, all of life is a play. Well, you're going to be in different parts, different plays, in different lifetimes, and the conditions around you are going to be different for those different lives. Yeah, so you might be in the Middle Ages in one life, and another life you're in the time of the Civil War in England, or you might be in the Victorian era when they're inventing steam engines, or you might be now, when Elon Musk is busy building massive starships, and you're thinking, oh, what shall I go to Mars? There's a lot of different movies to be taking a part in. It might only be a walk-on role. You might only be carrying a spear. You might not even have any words in the main play, or you might be one of the main characters. You might be the love interest. It could be all sorts of things, and we're each the star of our own play, of course. We're each the protagonist of our own little story within this life. And it can be a big story, or it can be a little story. It can be a little side story. But we have all these different lives to lead. Now, people say, well, what about Christianity? It teaches that you only have one life. It's a one-shot job. So you might be lucky. You might be Prince George. Your father's Prince William, and his father's Prince Charles, and Charles is going to be the next king, and then it'll be William, and then George. So George could be looking forward to a lovely life, living in palaces, riding in the golden carriage, waving. All the girls want to marry him. Fantastic. Or you might be one of his subjects, living in a tough council estate, in one of the northern cities, say. And there's gang culture there. It's a dangerous place. And if he wants to get out of there, there's all the temptations of the drugs and the knives, stabbings, and but he's a clever lad and he wants to go to university, and he might get to university, and he might work really hard in his life, and eventually he makes something of himself, like an Alan Sugar, say. He might become a very wealthy man, and in this world that's considered great. Or you might be someone that becomes a great eminent scientist or doctor. Or perhaps he'd be a bishop. Who knows? Now, who's had the greater life? The one of ease, riding the golden carriage all your life, or the one who's had to make his own way up? And that is kind of what life throws at us. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. You'll have some good lives, some bad lives, some difficult lives, some easy lives. That's kind of how it is, and it's a bit of a lottery, to be honest. So we have these situations of trying to find a good birth that will fit with your own destiny. But we'll talk about that another time, about destiny. So that's your personal reincarnation, but you need to do it because, as I say, the subtle body as such, normally speaking, it's like the mobile phone. It's only got a certain amount of charge in the battery at the end of your life, and that will take it through a certain period of time. It might not be very long. It might only be a few days before you need to be back into another body. Or if you've done the work and you've progressed enough to be able to reconnect, and we'll talk about that another time as well, through Jesus Christ. Remember, I deal in the Western way. I'm not really very interested in the Eastern ways. The Western way, you reconnect through Jesus Christ and get your karma cleared away for you. You can, because you need to be purified. The problem with trying to get reconnection is you've got to be at a certain vibrational level to be able to reconnect without blowing every fuse in your being. If you try and do that and you're not at the right level, you'll just destroy yourself. So it's a dangerous situation that we find ourselves in here, on a low vibration, when we need to reconnect to a higher voltage. That's our fundamental issue here. So now we're talking about your life as it's lived now. And I've put here, you inherit a genetic lineage from your parents. Right? So when you come into this life, you're going to have two parents, aren't you? And you're going to have your mother's genetics and you're going to have your father's genetics. And they come from lineages. And those lineages are going to have an influence on you. And think about dogs. Right? Now, all dogs are descended from wolves. You know that. I know that. They're all descended from wolves. And in their inner being, there is the wolf is still there. You know, the woo, you know, to the moon. Just like a wolf might. That's how wolves communicate over long distances with their pack. Dogs are naturally pack animals. They want to be with other dogs in a pack. They adopt families as their pack. So they look upon you as their pack, your family. And they'll seek, you know, they'll understand who's the boss, who's the leader. Should be mum and dad, you know, the leaders. And then there's the other pack members, the kids and the dog. And if you've trained the dog properly, he knows that he's at the bottom of the pile. So he doesn't go around biting the children, thinking that he's dominant to them. And certainly doesn't bite mum and dad. But if you're weak with the dog, and the dog thinks, well, there's no one as a leader, I better take on that role, that's when you have a troublesome dog. But anyway, that's by the by. Dogs come in every variety, don't they? You can have what in America they call a German Shepherd. We would call them an Alsatian in this country. And you know what Alsatians are like. They say they're one-man dogs. And they are defending dogs. They defend a place. And you try and enter the property they're defending, they'll go for you. That's their nature. And there are other dogs which are hunting dogs. You've got a great sense of smell, sniffing out foxes or deer or whatever. You can use those for tracking. And police use those, and you know, well, all dogs have a good sense of smell, but some even more, like a bloodhound or something. Or there are other dogs which, like dachshunds with their little short legs, you know. They're quite aggressive, and they can go down holes and seek out, you know, other animals like badgers, you know, and fight with them. They're very aggressive. So they don't necessarily make a good family dog, actually, because of that. Or you can have a little lap dog, a little lady's dog, like a Bichon Frise, whose nature is very affectionate, excellent with families and children, especially small children. Not going to hurt anyone. So dogs come in all varieties, but underneath that, they're all wolves. Now we understand that with dogs, that they all have their own pedigrees that come down to them. But we're very reluctant to understand that about people. You get called racist if you even dare suggest it. But we actually know that there are, for example, national stereotypes. And there's a very funny series on television. I really enjoy it, called Death in Paradise. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's set in a Caribbean island, and each episode is always more or less the same scenario. You have this paradise-like island, nice beaches, people on holiday, lovely sunshine, etc. And you have most of the people living there, of course, are Caribbeans, which means they're black. And you have the commissioner's a black man, and the black police officers. Except there's always one white guy who's been sent out from England, who is an inspector, a detective, and he's got the experience, the knowledge of how to solve murders. And he's always like a fish out of water. There's been different characters playing this kind of role, not the same role each time, but different. Always the inspector. And he's a fish out of water. He brings all his Englishness with him. For example, he's always very bashful and doesn't know how to chat up women. He's kind of very nervous and shy. And there's always this gorgeous woman sergeant, who works with him. And he's really attracted to the sergeant, but he can't say anything because he's inhibited and he's bashful. And she rather likes him, maybe. But she can't say anything. She's waiting for him to make a move. So there's this kind of sexual tension, which is focused on the English stereotype of being bashful and afraid to speak about their own feelings for the opposite sex. So that's kind of, that's not what the plot is. The plot is always solving a murder, and it's always more or less. So it's actually, I say the same. There's always a gang of people, and it's one of them that's done it. And he's very clever because he spots small, insignificant details in the crime scene, which always ends up being the key to solving the problem. And that's his plus, as opposed to his minus, which is he's incapable of holding or handling his emotions. So this is the plus and minus of the character, and it's very well observed, this kind of identity. And we have this knowledge about different nations and what they're like. We know what the French are like. We know what the Italians are like, the Greeks, the Russians. We have these stereotypes, which, yes, they're broad brush, but basically it's the difference between a sheepdog and a Bichon Frise or a bulldog, or all the different types. They're all dogs. They're all the same species, but there's different flavors and different aptitudes and different abilities inherent in the genetics of different people. And if you don't understand that, I'm sorry if this sounds politically incorrect, if you don't understand that, then you're never going to be able to take the right decisions in this world when dealing with people, because you need to understand who people are and where they're coming from. So that's one aspect of it. So that's going to limit your possibilities for a start. There's no use me trying to pretend I'm an Italian, because I'm not. And I don't have an Italian's outlook. I have an English outlook. And if I understand that about myself, and I accept that about myself, I'm going to be much more successful than if I try to emulate somebody else. And that's one of the problems we have with this present day political correctness, where people are very ashamed. A lot of people are very ashamed of being white. You might think, well, why are they ashamed of being white? I don't know, but they are. And they say, well, because we were slave drivers in the past, or, we should never have built empires. And, we've done terrible things to this planet with the Industrial Revolution. Yes, and maybe you have. It wasn't you. It was other people, your ancestors. But have you thought that the people who did those things, they might not be incarnated within your nation and your race now. They might be Chinese now. That's the way it works, you see, in reincarnation. So you've got to deal with the present and understand the present and try to do the best with whoever it is you are and with the talents you've got, and work with other people who've got other talents. This is the great thing. This is the great secret of success in life, is understanding how to build a team. And if you can build a team with different strengths, and they're not going to necessarily get on with each other on an ordinary interpersonal way because they're different. They don't have the same outlook. If you only hang out with people who share your outlook, then you're going to have a very one-sided team. You know, you can't all be centre-forward strikers. You can't all be goalkeepers. You need a full team that is able to play together and to supplement each other's strengths and weaknesses. So that's part of what reincarnation is about and for, is learning different skills in different situations. One day you might be a poodle, another day you might be a bulldog or an Alsatian or Dachshund in different lives. You need to understand that that's not something wrong. It's something that's to give you the opportunity of self-development in a wide range of contexts. Now, I'm going to move on a bit now. Right. Now, nearly all of us experience amnesia concerning our past lives. It is like Paris, Texas. Now, have you ever seen that movie, Paris, Texas? Where the guy, he wakes up and he's walking along this train line and he doesn't know who he is, how he got there, why he's there, what's going on. Completely lost his past. He doesn't know anything. Yes, he can still speak English. Yes, he's alive, but he doesn't know who he is. And that the film is gradually the unfolding of how he got there, what happened, what exactly happened. I don't even remember the end, actually, but it is actually how we are. We find ourselves in this life and think, how did I get here? Who am I? What the heck? And you then, your parents send you to school, you learn things, you learn mathematics, you learn how to read and write in your appropriate language. You learn about the culture that you're in. You learn the history of your nation, of your people, and you grow up and you're taking on that situation. That situation seems normal. And yet there is this sense, who am I? Why can't I remember? If there is truth about this reincarnation, why can't I remember my past lives? Surely if I could remember, if I could only just remember, I would make a better deal, a better job of it. But actually, it happens because it's your protection. You may have done things in your past lives that you would now be totally ashamed of, absolutely shocked. You may have been a horrible, terrible person. On the other hand, you might have been someone who was so good, so kind, so wonderful, and now you're in this awful, difficult situation. You think, well, why am I in this hovel when I'm a king? Yeah, I'm meant to be royal. Why am I here in a hovel? It's because you need to learn about what it means to live in a hovel and to be at the bottom of the heap instead of the top. Or vice versa. You might be put in a situation where you've got to learn manners. You've got to learn culture. You've got to learn to be a bit more than just a brute. So you're put in a situation where you're going to be forced to learn those things. So it is, in a sense, for your own protection that you have this amnesia when you come into this particular life. But can you research it? Can you find out a bit more about who you are? Well, the first thing I would say is that you'll have certain talents. Now, if you can identify what your talents are, that can give you some inkling, at least of the kind of person you might have been. For example, if you have a natural talent for music or art, these are very specific ones that are easy to spot. it probably means that you carried on this profession before. That it's something that is instilled. You've already developed that, so it comes to you very quickly and very easily. If you have a natural talent for speaking foreign languages, you probably did speak foreign languages in the past, or were certainly fluent in doing so. If you are very skilled at mathematics, then probably you were someone that was dealing in that before. If you're very mechanical, you've likely had lives before when you were very mechanical. If it comes to you easily, I mean, we could all learn things, but if you have a natural aptitude for something like that, then that is very often indicative that you've had a previous life. Another thing you can find is that if you're particularly attracted to a particular culture. Now, my parents were very, very interested in Spain. They loved Spain. Now, my mother was Welsh originally, and my father English. She hadn't been to Spain before until I think probably about 1960 or something. She fell in love with it instantly, and so did he. And he had this thing about bullfighting. He loved bullfighting. Whenever they'd go to Spain, they would go once a year. He would always go to a bullfight, and he'd bring back footage of bullfights, and we would have to sit and watch, cine film, judgery shit cine film of these bullfights. And I think, I don't see the attraction at all. She taught Spanish dancing. She learnt. She was actually trained ballet dancer anyway, but she had her own ballet school. But she taught Spanish dancing. She could play the castanets like a native. And she learnt Spanish. She spoke Spanish totally fluently. Now, I'm quite convinced they both had had lives, probably together, in Spain before. And they loved it. They loved the culture. They loved the colour. They loved the food. Their form of Catholicism was very kind of Spanish orientated. They definitely had past lives in Spain. Now, I, by contrast, I love Egypt, and I've got pictures of Egyptian things. I like going to the British Museum, seeing Egyptian things. And I wrote or co-authored the Orion Mystery with Robert Bovell. We went to Egypt together to do that. We made a film with the BBC about the Orion correlation. I have a connection with Egypt, clearly. And I've got other connections too. I'm very connected with Israel. I love Israel, and I love the place there, and the atmosphere there, and the history and the connection with the Bible, with Jesus, all of that. I'm very into that as well. So these are places where I've obviously had other lives before, clearly. I've got some inklings about what some of those lives might have been, but that's another story. I'll give you another example, though, which I know for certain. And that is the first time I went to America, I went to Arizona. And a friend of mine I was staying with in Tucson very kindly took me one day to Tombstone. You remember Tombstone City, Wyatt Earp, and gunfight at the OK Corral and all of that? Well, of course, I knew about those things because, I've been into cowboys when I was a boy. We all were. But when I went to Tombstone, I remember I was outside the courthouse, I think it was. And I thought, I know this place. It's just so familiar to me. It's like I've come home. Well, I know this place. And that was particularly in the old part of the town. And it was like, I've come home, I know this place. And some years later, I had a sudden vision, past life regressive vision, you could call it, that I had actually lived in Tombstone, and I'd been the guy that ran the local newspaper, and I knew Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. I used to play cards with them, which is extraordinary, isn't it? So there's a connection to a past life that I must have spent in, or at least part of the time, in Tombstone. I knew the place very well. And you can get this kind of thing happen to you where you go to some place and you think, I know this place, I've been here before. And that can be quite startling too. Or you can go to somewhere and you feel utter dread. Maybe something awful happened to you in that place in another time. So I'm just giving you these examples. I know a few of my past lives from glimpses like this. And you can get those kind of glimpses if they're going to be helpful to you in unraveling aspects of your present life. But mostly you're going to be, you're working on something different this time round, so you don't want the hangover of the previous life. Yes, we forget so that we can work on ourselves. We are like actors. And each life is like a new character in a new play. We need to develop a new personality, but our soul remains the same. So I'll just say that. There's a difference between your essence and your personality. Yeah, my essence is the same. Whatever life I go to, I'm the same inside. But I will have a different personality. Because you develop your personality as a response to the situation outside you. You learn how to deal with it. You develop a persona. Persona means a mask, Latin for mask. So you develop a mask for the world so that you can deal with it comfortably. And actually you have a variety of these masks. You have one you wear with your family, yeah? Especially if you're a child, you don't swear, you don't do this, you don't do that. You have another mask with your friends. Yeah, you can be more relaxed with your friends, your peer group. Or you have one for work. You'll have a different mask for work, your work persona. And it can be very embarrassing actually when two of these different groups or people from these different groups meet through you, might be accidentally, and you have to introduce one to the other, and you've got a different persona with one from the other. That can be awkward. So you have to find a third mask, as it were, that can get you through that. But we develop these different masks, our persona. We have an overall persona, which is how we behave in this life, this one that we're in now. But that's not really you. And as I say, after you die, after a period of time, that mask will disappear, dissolve away, to leave the inner you, the true self, as it were, ready to take on another life or to be reconnected. You'll still have those masks there that you can jump into if you want, if you need to. Say you are now a high soul, a high spirit, connected, but you want to go and clairvoyantly speak to a relative who's still on Earth. You might adopt the persona that they would recognize in the way that you talk to them, perhaps. And I'm not recommending you do this, but perhaps through a clairvoyant, or maybe in some other way. So that they might adopt that persona, but they actually are not really that persona either, any more than you are the persona that you're wearing today. So these are things that we have to take into account when we're talking about reincarnation, and exactly what does reincarnate. Yes, so it is true that all humans have souls and are made in the image of God. However, they're not equal in development. Exactly. So you're going to meet people in this life who are very developed. You might do anyway. Or you're going to meet people who are completely undeveloped, who are like young souls. We talk about old and young souls, don't we? Old souls are the ones who are more developed. Right, so I've put here, not everyone can run a marathon or a 1 minute mile. Not everyone can understand rocket science or sing. We're all different. But you can develop the talents that you've got, and that's your best path in this life, is to identify what you have skills with, develop those, but also try to identify your weaknesses that are holding you back. I mean, have you ever played the card game Bridge, where you have four people and you deal out all the cards? You have 13 cards each. You're trying to make tricks. You have to each put a card down as you go around the circle, and whoever has the highest card wins the trick. And you have suits which are trumps. So when you're dealt 13 cards, you're going to probably have some suits, or one suit probably that's stronger than the others. You have a bidding war. What you're going to play is going to be trumps in that round, that game. But you're probably going to be deficient in at least one other suit. So you might have kings and queens, maybe the ace in one suit, but only 4 and 5, and or even no cards at all in another suit. So the skill in bridge is not about so much taking tricks with your high cards. Any fool can do that. It's how you play the weak cards, how you compensate for the areas that you're weak in, how you make it not matter. And that's what separates good bridge players from bad ones. And I won't say that I'm a good bridge player. I haven't played it for years, but this is kind of how life is. You're going to have strong suits, and you need to play those strong suits. Yeah, for your career, for your what you're going to do in life. That's your strong suit is what you're probably going to do best in. But you must also be aware of what your weak suits are and play those as well, and learn, try to develop those aspects of yourself that are weak. For example, when I was young, I had my first major job was as a sales rep for a drug company when I left university. Now, being a sales rep was the last thing I ever wanted to do. The absolute last thing I ever wanted to do. Yeah, I'm not that sort of person. I'm actually quite introverted. And to go out, having to sort of go and meet people and try and get them to prescribe the drugs of this company, I didn't really believe in that anyway. I didn't like it. I didn't last very long, I should tell you, but I had to do a number of sales jobs in my life, mostly to do with books. And gradually I built up the strength in that area that had initially been a weakness for me. So now I'm quite confident doing sales, well, I have no problems about that at all. But when I was young, it was exactly the last thing I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was to find the truth and to write. And it was a long time before I could actually get to do that. And to be honest, I'm actually quite good at that. It's what I'm meant to be doing in this life. But I needed to bring up the other side. And another thing I had to learn and do, I was a computer programmer for some years, and I'm not very good at that at all. It's not that I can't understand it, I can. It's just that my nature, I tend to make careless mistakes, like misspelling words or leaving out a full stop when you need one. And these kind of things, these little detail things. And to be a really good computer programmer, actually the program has to be 100%. It's not 99.9% won't do. You've got to have no bugs in it for it to work properly. And to have no bugs in it, you've got to be really, really thorough. And that's not my personality. But by doing that for some years, it actually helped my writing. Because to write computer programs, you've got to think very structurally. And I learnt that talent by doing that. So some things you do which aren't right for you can actually be needed in order to cope with the weak suits in your hand, to bring those up to strength, or at least enough strength, so they're not stopping you from being able to play the major suit properly. Does that make some sense? Anyway, so that's to do with past lives. Right, all of us bring into life karma from past lives, some good, some bad. We have genetic inheritance, some good and some bad. So we have genetic inheritance from our parents, some good, some bad. We all need to connect to the Holy Ghost to break the bonds of karma, right? So I'm sorry to use that word karma. I mean, I know it's an Eastern word, and if you're a Christian, you probably hate to hear anything like that. It sort of rings bells of New Agey stuff. But it's a useful word. We know what it means. It means you do bad to someone, it's going to rebound on you sometime or other. Those who live by the sword die by the sword, is how it's often put. What you do is what will come back to you. It's kind of how we think of it in the West. So if you do good works, you try to do good things, then good will come back to you. And one of the things I try to do is I try to leave things better than I found them. So when I was renting a flat a long time ago, I tried to leave it in a better shape when I moved on than when I had moved in there. It's just you're raising the vibration. So when you leave things, try to leave them in a better state than how you found them. So our garden, we've done a lot of work in the garden. It was little more than just a field when we first came here. Now we've got really quite a nice garden. So when we move on, whoever has this house next, they're going to have a nice garden to start with. Then it's up to them if they're going to maintain the standard or make it better still. But this is what you should try to do in life. That way you are a positive force in the universe rather than a negative one. If you're the sort of person who comes into something and wrecks it, like the Russians are doing in Ukraine, we've come here to help you. We come here to rescue you from the Nazis. What do? We smash your cities down. We kill lots of you. We destroy everything. We blunder in, but we're doing it for your benefit. I mean, that's no way to go. That is a destructive spirit that's not going to lead anywhere. You need to be someone that raises vibrations, raises situations, and a civilizing force, not a barbarizing force, is how I put it. So that's one aspect of working with your karma. But ultimately, to get away from the past, each time you come into a life, you're going to make more mistakes. We all, you go into a church or somewhere, and you see all these stained glass saints up in windows, and you think, wow, they were so holy, so wonderful, But I can't be like that. They're much better people than I was. Well, do you really think that, sir? I don't. They were probably had their bad times too. They did things they wish they hadn't done. Of course they did. And they repented of it. But they also did good things. And the good outweighs the bad. And that's what you need to be trying to do, is make sure you have enough good to outweigh the bad. So when you come before that throne and you're being judged, then when the accuser says, look, you did all those terrible things, you're the bad guy. I say, well, actually, yeah, I know I did those things. I really wish I hadn't. But look at the good things I've done as well. Can you have mercy on me? That's kind of how it really is in the real world. We're not all white. And I'm not talking about skin colour. We're not all perfect. Of course we aren't. We might have bad tempers, we might be lazy, we might have had affairs when we wish we hadn't, or we might have even got into, killed someone, like Moses did. The things that you really wish you hadn't done, but you did. The only way you're going to really break free from the cycle of karma is linking through the Christ Spirit to the breath of God, the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, to wash that away. That's the only way you're going to do it. And I don't want to sound like one of those pompous asses with a big hat, and the flowing robes. Oh, it comes. No, I'm not like that. I don't give a toss about that. Archbishop Welby and the rest of his holier than thou nonsense. What you have to do is to come in all humility and ask God for forgiveness for your sins, and try to do better, and try to do some good works in your life. Try to raise the vibration, not depress it. And that way, you'll make it. You'll make the crown. So what else have I got here before we go? The Western way is to reconnect to the light through Jesus Christ. Yes, that's exactly what it is. And we do this through humility and confession to God. Well, that's what I just said. Believe it or not, all these stained glass saints were not actually holy either. Now, I want to tell you something here. If you read in the Bible, Jesus says, he goes to Capernaum in northern Galilee, and he calls out the 4 fishermen and tells them to leave their nets and come follow him. And that's Peter and Andrew, they're 2 brothers, and James and John, they're 2 brothers. And he says, later on, he says, I knew you before you were even born. So what's happened here is that these are souls who've actually come into incarnation in order to be his helpers. You don't think he came in on his own. Of course he didn't. John the Baptist went before him. He's the reincarnation of Elijah. Jesus actually tells us that in the Bible. But these other 4 were also reincarnated. And I think all of the 12 apostles were reincarnations of people who had worked with him before. And probably some of the other people that we meet with in the Bible as well, like Joseph of Arimathea, his mother Mary, his other family members, he had brothers and sisters. So there are these people who've worked with him before that are his team. So you can be sure that when he came into this world, he came in knowing his team were here already. Now here's a question. If Jesus is coming back for a second time, do you think his team are already here? I'll leave that with you. You might be one of them. So anyway, thank you very much. And I hope you enjoyed this little lecture. And we'll do this sort of thing again from time to time, as well as doing the other kinds of lectures. And we're moving now into kind of a more intimate way with the college itself, and I'm going to be doing more kind of like courses. I've actually got someone who's working with me to make us the website, which I failed in miserably myself. It was, I have too much else on my mind to really focus on that, and she's very kindly doing it for me. So thank you again, and we're going to take this thing further, and I wish you well for the summer, and the solstice is coming. Thank you.